Okay. Second myth with a kernel of truth. Fluid migration from faulty wells is a rare phenomenon. It's true. It's rare. What's your definition of rare? 2%?
1 in 1,000.
1 in 1,000? Let's find out. Okay, so what does methane or other hydrocarbon migration from a faulty well look like? Whoops. If I can find my glasses, here we go. I don't have any sound turned on here, but what you're looking at, oh, thank you. Wondered where those went. You're looking at a wellhead. This is the part of the well that's coming out of the ground, and inside of that is the production casing. The gas is supposed to be coming up inside that only. And this bubbling water is in the so-called cellar of the well. That's an area that's been excavated out around the wellhead, which frequently fills with rainwater or snowmelt. And that water now becomes a telltale. So what you're seeing is gas migration outside the well. So if gas migrates outside the well, it's possible that on its way up, it comes in contact with an underground source of drinking water. In other words, methane contamination of somebody's private water well. Even if it doesn't, it's now migrating directly into the atmosphere where it becomes a very potent greenhouse gas. Okay. So that's an example of methane migration from a faulty well. I'll point out some statistics later on about how frequently that happens in your state. I'll show you another example of methane migration. I'm a trout fisherman, so this one is especially egregious to me. Nice trout stream. And some fishermen were on it last June, and they noticed something they'd never seen before. So you saw Gasland last night? Remember the guys lighting the bubbling streams? So this has happened in a number of streams and in the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania. So Chesapeake was fined $700,000 for some of these egregious acts to trout streams. And they voluntarily donated $200,000 to your plugging campaign. But that's irrelevant. The relevant thing is that the nearest gas well to this stream was 3,600 feet away. So your current regulations, if I'm correct, still say that companies have to be responsible, bear primary responsibility for methane contamination of an underground source of drinking water within 1,000 feet of their well. But here's prima facie evidence that migration can occur over much longer distances than 3,000, much longer distances than 1,000 feet. In fact, geology says how far it can go. A regulation doesn't tell geology what to do, and a company can't regulate nature. Whatever nature says the gas can do, the gas can do. And if it's 3,600 feet or 5,000 feet, so be it. Write your regulations accordingly. Another thing to note here is that in one case, the previous video, you saw gas just bubbling up outside the well, very close to the well. Here you're seeing gas bubbling up 3,600 feet away. Can gas bubble up any place in between? Have you ever seen a forest floor bubble? Is the gas only going to bubble up in streams and rivers? Or only going to bubble up in cellars? It's going to come up wherever it wants to. And how will you know it's there? Can you smell it? No. Is somebody out there with a sniffer trying to find it? So do we really know how much methane migration is occurring even on wells where there's no bubbling in the cellar? No. We don't know. Not without regional measurements of flux, like that was just published in Colorado. Those of you who read the literature know that just about a month ago, a paper came out of NOAA and University of Colorado where they went over a long period of time, over a year, and set up measurement instrumentation to find out how much methane and other VOCs were in the atmosphere in Weld County. And they found out a hell of a lot of it, much more than we ever expected. Have those regional types of measurements been done in Pennsylvania in the last 4 years? No. Are they now going to be mandatory? No. So we'll talk about that later. All right, so why do wells fail? I want to get to that question about rare. To get the answer to the question about rare, you have to understand the various mechanisms by which wells can fail, lose their integrity, and allow methane or other hydrocarbons to migrate outside the well, where you lose control of it. Nature takes over at that point. So I did some experiments with Schlumberger. Yes, I did lots of research with Schlumberger for many years. We did some research back in the late 1980s. 1989, here's a 2-meter cube of tight sandstone, not shale. And we wanted to see what fracturing looked like. What do perforations look like? What does casing look like? What does cement look like? What does it look like? All the stuff you've been reading about. So you can't go down and look. But you can do a model experiment on real rock in a laboratory, which is what we did. So we drilled this block using a regular drill bit, and we put a casing in it, and we cemented the casing. We perforated the casing. We put red dye in the fracturing fluid, injected the fracturing fluid through the perforations, created hydraulic fractures, and when we were done, we broke open the block to see what happened. It's called a validation experiment. You have an engineering concept put into a computer model that says, here's what's likely to happen. But it's just a computer model based on people's concepts of what should happen. You have to validate it by doing an experiment to see whether your computer model is right. So I'm going to break open this block, and here's what you see. And here's your education on what's downhole. And this is the beginning of your understanding of all the things that can go wrong. What's silver is the casing. What's gray is the cement sheath, sometimes called concrete. It's not. It's cement. We've got a lot of that stuff around here, right? It's cement powder, water, and a few additives. So in this case, we broke open a block. These are the records of hydraulic fractures. They've been stained red by the stain, the dye that we put in hydraulic fracturing fluid. Here's another view. In this experiment, the cement remained intact. That hole is a perforation shot with a perforating gun. Here's another one that's actually, you can see the tip of it in the rock itself. And again, a whole set of interacting, multiple, non-planar, realistic hydraulic fractures. So what can go wrong? Well, the casing could fail. There are cases of that in Pennsylvania. The cement could fail or not even be there. Lots of things can go wrong. So one way to look at those is to go to the industry itself and ask them to tell us what can go wrong. And so Southwestern Energy is usually held up as the model company to work with. I thought that was funny. But anyway, never mind. It's okay. There are a lot of, I'm from New York. We have a lot of these kind of crazy jokes about, shale gas development. What do regulations do? Regulations allow them to break into your house, but forbid them to scratch your furniture. Okay. And certain companies are held up as models of transparency and honesty and openness, and to a degree they are. So Southwestern, among all the companies, in my opinion, is the most transparent and honest. But what's your measure of honesty? So this is their video. This is a Southwestern Energy video that they put together. The red dots are gas molecules, right? And this is a well that's working perfectly. All the gas is going up the production casing. Here's gray. Remember, what's gray now? Gray is cement, right? White is no cement. In some places, you don't have to cement all the way to the surface. Every annulus, an annulus is the volume between the outside of the casing and the inside of the rock. And here are intermediate production zones, or shallow producing zones, aka the Dimick problem. The gas is not just all the way down there in the Marcellus. The gas is in intermediate levels of shale. And you got to make sure that the high pressure gas in these intermediate levels don't get outside the casing and up to the surface or into an underground source of drinking water. So this video shows everything's fine. The cement is intact. These molecules can't get through the cement. They can't get into the open annulus, therefore they can't get to the surface and cause bubbling. They can't get into the rock above and cause underground contamination. But there are many things that could go wrong, and I don't have time to tell you about all those things, so I'll just show you a couple of them and then show you the one that they didn't show you, which is the most important one, of course. So one of the things that can happen, for those of you who know about cement, and everybody around here knows about cement, the cement goes down as a liquid, right? All right, so they pump the cement down the inside of the casing. It comes all the way to the end and then goes all the way back up, and it goes to a level called top of cement, and then it starts to harden. Except before it hardens, it's a liquid. And if it's in contact with a high-pressure gas, what happens when you squirt a high-pressure gas on liquid cement? Well, you get a mess. And you get what's called channeling. So you can get loss of contact between the cement and the rock, and now the cement is useless. It's really not there. It's not doing its primary job, which is sealing the annulus. That happens a lot. That's one thing that can go wrong. Another thing that can go wrong is you get a leak through the casing. The casing is not one long continuous pipe, it's jointed. Every joint is a weakness. And every once in a while, the casing is produced faultily, and it contains cracks, or it can crack because it can get overpressurized. And if the casing fails, then you can get gas coming out and going to the surface, where it can either go into the atmosphere or build up pressure and go into an underground source of drinking water. You can have a poorly designed well, which is what happened in Dimmick and most of the wells. They never got the cement to the top that they wanted to, so they had pressurized gas from shale formations above the Marcellus getting into an open annulus and going up to the surface. So again, there's a lot of cement knowledge in the Lehigh Valley, right? How long does it take cement to cure? How long does it take to go from liquid to solid? Well, no, I don't mean strength. I mean, when it goes from liquid to solid, a few hours, right? Depending upon the additives. You can delay it, you can accelerate it, depends upon temperature, all kinds of things. But what happens is that some engineer has to make a judgment. The cement engineer has to make a judgment, because if the cement takes too long to cure, they have to shut down the whole operation while they're cementing. Nobody else can do anything. And it takes many, many dollars per minute to be developing a gas well. So they don't want the cement to take too long to cure. What happens if the cement solidifies before it comes all the way back up? That's called lockup. Uh-oh, the cement didn't get to where you wanted it to go. And that's what happens again frequently. So instead of the cement top being up here and then forming hopefully a good barrier so that these molecules can't get into that open annulus, you have an open annulus totally open to gas pressure, and now the gas goes wherever Mother Nature says it can go. Now, the most common problem here is not shown. And it doesn't, I want to make sure you understand this, because there are millions of dollars being spent by the oil and gas industry on television ads and on newspaper ads right now that want you to believe that 4 layers of steel and 4 layers of cement are better than 3 layers of steel and 3 layers of cement. And 3 layers of steel and 3 layers of cement are better than 2 layers of steel and 2 layers of cement. And they want you to know that they're now using up to 4 or 5 or 6 layers of steel and cement. Doesn't make a damn bit of difference. There's always an outermost layer. There's always an outermost layer. I don't care how many you have, there's always a contact layer between the cement and the rock. And that's the contact, that bond. They can't detect it, they can't measure it, they can't observe it. There are techniques for figuring out whether the cement is in contact with the casing, with the steel casing. Lots of good technology to tell them that. But what they can't tell is whether there's good bond between the outside of the cement and the inside of the rock. And by the way, it's not just one kind of rock. You might be 7,000 or 8,000 feet down. There could be hundreds of different kinds of rock, each of which has its own chemistry, its own coefficient of friction, its own bonding chemistry with the cement. And you got one kind of cement that you want to bond